Hi, welcome to Talk About here on Shaw TV. My name is John Twigg. We've got another political show for you. The guest is Claire Trevena, MLA for North Island. Claire, thanks for coming in.
Well, thanks very much for having me, John.
Yeah, well, it's there's always something to talk about in politics.
There certainly is, and particularly BC politics at this time of year. Even at in summer, we have quite a lot still on our plates.
Yeah, well, I'd like to do a session review, but actually the item in the news, at least as we're recording this, is there's a special sitting of the legislature this summer, July 13th.
We're back for, as far as we know, 1 week, but we don't know how long it'll go on for. We do know that there is one specific piece of legislation that the government wants to pass, and that's about liquefied natural gas and the regime over which it is effectively sold to foreign companies and how that is going to be set up, how long it's going to last. It seems from what we've been hearing, we don't know the details yet, but it looks like it's one of the government's classic sellouts. You know, that they will give up everything to the company to entice the company to come and invest in liquefied natural gas so they can show that they actually have a plant working, but it's going to end up costing people of BC a lot of money. We haven't obviously seen the legislation yet, but that is why the legislature is being called back, is that one piece of legislation.
I was reading an article and I saw there's something like a 23-year lock-in for the terms that you're going to, whether you like it or not, approve.
Well, it's very interesting because governments aren't supposed to tie the hands of future governments.
Yes.
But the way this government has worked right since 2001, after saying that it's going to respect contracts, it tore up trade union contracts, but then wrote some very, very nasty, tight contracts with their own friends. So whether it was the private power producers and now the liquefied natural gas producers and others, these contracts are being designed in a way that it will cost the province a huge amount of money to renegotiate them. So on the one hand, it's fine to tear up contracts that look after workers' rights and workers' pay. On the other hand, we're going to set this really, really tight contract that is going to affect all of us by effectively selling off the family silver or tying it up for a long while.
Yeah, and the proponents in this one, it's often referred to as the Petronas, which I think, is it Indonesia or Malaysia?
Malaysia. It's a Malaysian state-owned company.
Yeah, but it's got 4 partners from 4 different countries. So a total of 5 foreign entities. And the danger is, you know, they're going to get a sweetheart deal.
Well, they will get a sweetheart deal because the Premier, Christy Clark, went to the electorate 2 years ago saying, we're going to have liquefied natural gas, we're going to have these fantastic plants, we're going to have so many of them, we're going to have trillions of dollars, and we're going to have a prosperity fund, and we're never going to have to pay MSP anymore or any sales tax. It's all going to be wonderful.
And pay off all the debt.
We're going to pay off all the debt. Now, 2.5 years into their mandate, they haven't got one deal signed.
Not even close.
This is the desperate case they're in. They know that in 18 months they're going to be facing the electorate again, and the people are going to say, so why are we still paying our, why are we paying our sales tax? Why have we still got a debt? Why do we still have MSP? So the government is getting desperate and will do whatever deals it can to ensure that there is somebody producing LNG and selling it. And yes, the thing is, this is our resource. It belongs to all the people of BC, and yet it's being sold to foreign company, and foreign companies will be able to do what they want with it at very cheap.
Yeah. Now, there's, I'll play devil's advocate as a journalist. There's a climate issue. The Campbell government was death on carbon. I think I exaggerate. But, here we are. We're going to be pumping more carbon into the atmosphere. I personally am not terribly upset at that. But is the NDP going to take a climate position on this?
Well, our position on LNG has been very clear right from the outset. We've said that there's got to be complete involvement of First Nations, which we have not seen. We've said that it's got to involve the people of BC for jobs and ensure there is proper training, apprenticeships, and have that built in for development. It's got to protect our land, air, and our water. We cannot do anything that jeopardizes our land, air, and our water. And we've got to meet all our climate commitments, those that we have as a province, and those that are being imposed on us, quite rightly, I believe, from UN, from other sources. So those areas, we've said very clearly, on the environmental side, got to meet climate conditions, and we've got to protect our land, air and water before we should be pushing ahead with this.
And the Treasury.
We see that there is an industry there.
Yeah.
We don't see it on anything like the scale that the Premier is promising, but there have to be protections. There have to be protections for First Nations complete involvement, for jobs here for BCers, and for our resource, our natural environment to be protected.
Now, there's some debate about whether or not we've got enough gas. I think we do have lots of gas up there, especially if we frack deep. But I wonder about the pipeline. This is going to require a new pipeline from somewhere to somewhere. Where do we know where yet?
Well, it depends where the plants are, and whether it's going to be in Kitimat or it's going to be in Prince Rupert, how that's going to work, and where their source of gas is. I mean, when we had the question about LNG in Campbell River, that was coming from the Horn Basin, which was up in the northeast of BC, and they were going to bring it down and then pipe it across the Strait of Georgia and then up from Nanaimo to Campbell River. It was quite complex, so it depends really where the plant is going to be and where their source of natural gas is, because there are a number of different sources in BC. The pipeline issue is different from the Enbridge pipeline, the tar sands pipeline, heavy bitumen pipeline, because if natural gas leaks, you've still got the construction of the pipeline, which is obviously a concern, but if gas leaks, it doesn't have the impact that bitumen would have.
Unless somebody lights it.
I think it evaporates pretty quickly when it's in there.
True.
But I'm not a scientist on that, and that hasn't been an issue in discussions I've had. It's been the impact of the industry as a whole rather than the pipeline specific.
I gather the plant that's going to compress the gas and then load it onto ships is going to be at something called Lalou Island, which is kind of like northwest of Prince Rupert.
Well, this is the one of the questions. This is what there was the vote for the First Nations of the area, the people whose traditional territory is, and they came out very strongly saying they didn't want this, that they were being offered a lot of money to have it, and they've said we still don't want it. Don't try and bribe us. We know what is good for our people and our land. So it's going to be interesting how all this goes ahead, even with this deal that we may be discussing in the legislature when we go back, how it will all unfold. Because, say, First Nations have come out pretty strongly saying, this is not what we are looking for, this is not what our people are looking for.
Yeah, good. Well, there's lots of other stuff happening in the sad state of BC politics, as it says here in my notes. The sitting just ended, and I'll just give a brief, the removing emails from FOI, the health firings, there's a call for an inquiry, hospitals underfunding and dysfunctions, the Truth and Reconciliation response has been inadequate, information technology contracts were botched. Do you want to pick any of those? Or did I leave something out?
Well, I've got to say, one of the ones that has been bubbling under, well, there are two. One I think we should be addressed is the health firings and the need for a public inquiry. I mean, we had people who were summarily dismissed. We had a government that lied about what happened. This led to people's lives being destroyed and one person committing suicide. I mean, this is horrendous that this could be happening in BC. And the fact that the government is not willing to say, we need to get to the bottom of it, we need to know how these decisions are made, why they are made, what was behind it. Apologies aren't enough. We really do need to see
a judicial inquiry or a commission, or how do you see?
Well, I'd see a sort of an inquiry as we had the missing women's inquiry, sort of a public inquiry where you have somebody who is a justice, a judge, leading an inquiry where you actually examine all the evidence, you ask lots of questions, you examine all the witnesses, and you find out just who made what decision at what time.
And that's a subpoena power.
They should have, yes. And so we can actually find out what's happened. I mean, the government had a very superficial, basically whitewash inquiry and saying it's all fine and don't worry about it and we're terribly sorry. And frankly, that doesn't suffice what is necessary. What's necessary is a full public inquiry to find out just what happened. And so people can, not just that the people can get on with their lives, but so this doesn't happen again. That's why you have a public inquiry. So these sorts of actions don't happen again. Otherwise, BC is going to be, with this government, is going to be fated to carry on repeating and repeating and repeating the terrible mistakes it has. And this is, there is a sense that something is being hidden. If there's nothing being hidden, about this. Why the delay in having the inquiry? Why all this obfuscation?
I can speculate that there are some people close to the government who made the decision, partisan appointees, and they're protecting them.
That's very, very, very possible, but without an inquiry, we'll never know.
Yeah, we don't know.
And that's why we have been calling very vociferously for this public inquiry.
Yeah.
I think that it's for the families they need it, for the workers they need it, and for the people of BC to have trust in their government. And I think this is what's so symptomatic. When you say the sorry state of BC politics is people lose trust in their government. We've got this. We have the fact that the government routinely deletes emails, that they have this oral culture, so you can't find out how decisions are being made. This is appalling that this is happening, and it's been happening for some time, that there is just no email trace. We asked about questions of the Minister of Citizen Services, and it's just, it goes on and on, that they will just routinely delete emails.
Yeah. I'm looking for the one that you mentioned. It was amazing that there was was it the ferries where? Oh yeah, you asked for the communication between the minister and the ferry commissioner.
Yes, so asked.
And they said none.
Yes, this was during the time of when the government, the Ferries Commissioner was looking at the new performance term. Yeah. Everything's done in 4-year chunks on BC Ferries these days, and they were looking at the new plans for this. And so we requested the correspondence between the CEO of BC Ferries and the Minister over this period when there would be all this happening, and there was no response. And the CEO said, well, I'm one of these people, I prefer to pick up the phone. Yeah. The minister just sort of looked like a deer in the headlights, and so we didn't get any response. But less than just the not keeping records, it's the decision to delete. And we saw that with right at the end of the session, that somebody came forward on the question about the Highway 16, the Highway of Tears, the bus that has been requested. There was a public, some form of public consultation. We have asked questions many times in the legislature about that public consultation. The minister has not been very clear about it. We asked for freedom of information. We got back no details. The person who had worked in the minister's office came forward and said he had been told to delete all the emails responding to that. He had been told in the minister's office to delete that. We've seen that there. We've seen that in the Minister of Citizen Services. We've seen that across the board. And this is very, very worrying that people who work in the minister's office are told in that minister's office to hide information, to destroy information.
Gordon Campbell's deputy, whose name escapes me, when he was first premier, he's a very powerful fellow, he apparently instructed people not to write things down.
Don't write things down, there will be no written record. But this is different. This is different from not writing things down. This is absolutely deliberately destroying anything that has been written down. Deliberately destroying it. And people have a right to know how decisions are made and what decisions were made and why they were made. This is part of the public trust, part of the public process. And obviously in certain cabinet decisions there will be confidentiality, there has to be. But on the whole, people have the right to know. And for a government to deliberately delete information is disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful.
Let's move to information technology contracts. These are multi-hundred million dollar contracts to recomputerize the health system, and I think BC Hydro had a let's recomputerize everything, and that's of course not literally correct. You don't computerize things, but is that right? Like $500 million just wasted?
Hundreds of millions. We've had on this. We've had most recently BC Hydro. We've had, as you say, Ministry of Health. We've had what's known as BC ESIS. School District 72 wasn't involved with this, but Ministry of Education brought in one. And we've had the Integrated Case Management for Children and Family Development and the Ministry of Social Development. So people on welfare, people involved, very personal issues, all of which have been botched. The Integrated Case Management one was $197 million and counting and it still doesn't work.
Yeah.
They're still using it because what
Yeah.
you keep on after a while, do you finally ditch it and start all over
Yeah.
again?
Yeah.
But we know that in certain cases they're still using the old technology because they trust it more than the new
Yeah.
one, which is costing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars.
And with the Ministry of Social Services, I don't think they call it that anymore, but there's kids getting their lives lost because the computer system is inoperable.
If you can't find very easily, what is happening in a certain household, you're potentially putting a child's
Yeah.
life in danger.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
incredible that the government can
Yeah.
just carry on saying it's all right. We
Yeah.
get it. You're patching it up. Don't
Yeah.
worry about it. And it's very
Well,
much this sort of don't worry. You don't really understand its technology.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to raise this issue, apart from obviously it's a management concern, but the price tag. You know, we hear constantly there's not enough money for schools, there's not enough money for healthcare. You know, there's not enough. We got to go to the private sector to get operations done now to catch up on the backlog. And yet they have wasted hundreds of millions of dollars on these big ticket contracts to major computer companies.
Absolutely.
Software.
I think if you look at integrated case management, 197 million. The hydro one, the health one, the education one, you'd be talking, I would say, close to $1 billion on systems that either have just not worked at all or are so clunky that they may never work. Yeah. And as you say, this is money that could be invested in so many different ways. I mean, I have my own little list here in the North Island. I have for my spokesperson's role a whole little a list right across the province. $1 billion goes a long way. Yeah. And if you're talking about Site C being $8 billion, that's $1 billion is a lot of money.
You know, I admire you're so politically correct. Her critic role is now called a spokesperson role. But and that's not you. That was the whole caucus that decided.
Yes, we are not just criticising, which there is a lot of criticism that needs to be done. I think after nearly 15 years of this government, we'd have to continue to criticise it. But we also speaking on behalf of people and speaking with ideas of new approaches.
So turning to ferries, I warned Claire, and she agreed, obviously, but. There's a lot of news releases coming out now about sailing delays on all sorts of sailings, not just one or two routes, but like particularly West Van to Langdale, that's the Sunshine Coast. Sailing delays due to heavy traffic. So what's your take on that?
Well, for me, it signifies that the ferry system is well used, that despite what the company says about how we don't actually have enough people really wanting to use it. I mean, I look at it for cost that a lot of people don't want to use it, and we do see that there are times when we've got real problems. People can't afford to use it. But there is a real need to have the ferries working and have the ferries working efficiently. Sailing delays basically means that for some reason they're just not moving the people fast enough. So do you need more ferries on the route? Do you need to increase the service, increase the frequency? You've got to start looking at these things because the amount of frustration I've had is huge. I see it regularly in this constituency for the Port McNeill Alert Bay run. It's quite often there's been delays for overloads. And as you say, the one in the Langdale run, it's regularly that there are delays because it's too busy.
But it's also happening on Horseshoe Bay and Tsawwassen too. Mm-hmm. Now, the ferry fares, they've raised them, and I guess the argument is that people are going to travel anyway. But what have you seen as the critic in terms of suppressing commerce, and maybe on the Quadra run? Have you seen firsthand?
Oh, hugely, yes. I mean, you see the community has changed because of the increase in fares. Yeah. I mean, they've gone up. On average, across the board, I would say they've gone up about 85%. Some of the runs, like the Quadra run, it's well over 100% since 2003 when they made the change. So that is having a very big impact on whether it's on the from real estate through to whether people can afford to just do where they do their shopping, how they can run a business. This is having a very, very serious impact. And this is something that the minister just seems to miss, that ferries are not a pleasure voyage for when you're on vacation. They are a lifeline They were set up to open up the coast economy and ensure that everybody in BC was connected by a SOCRED. His vision was to ensure that our economy was integrated. This minister clearly doesn't see that. He sees them either as a tourist operation or these little ones where people choose to live on the islands and so they can have whatever is left over. And so there is a real disconnect of the importance of BC Ferries to our infrastructure from this minister. It's
is that
very,
Todd
very
Stone?
worrying. Todd Stone,
So he's
yes.
the transportation minister, also responsible for ferries.
He is.
And you're the spokesperson for transportation, also critic for ferries.
Yeah.
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 When W.A.C. Bennett created BC Ferries, and he basically nationalized something called blackball ferries, the argument back then, there was a labor dispute and it was killing commerce. So it's the same argument now, is it not? That it kills commerce.
That is the argument that most rational people would use. I call myself a rational person. That's the argument I use. I see it daily. I mean, both in our community, whether it's Campbell River, whether it's Quadro, Cortez is really suffering. I mean, it costs $100 to get to Cortez now. It is up and down the coast.
Well,
it's having a massive impact on the economy. And that's where I would have thought that the government would step in and say, we've made a mistake, time to fix it. Time to say, let's freeze fares, bring them back down, and get accountability back into the ferry system. There is no accountability. The minister just says basically, BC Ferries got a contract to do this. BC Ferry says we're fulfilling our contract. The ferry commissioner has the role of overseeing it all, but there is no accountability. The minister should take responsibility for the impact this is having on the economy. I mean, you don't look at the Portman Bridge to make a profit. You don't look at Massey Tunnel to make a profit. You don't look at Highway 97 to make a profit. You don't look at BC Transit or even TransLink to make a profit. But they look at BC Ferries to make a profit. That's where the mistakes are coming in.
I want to get it into the Port Hardy to Bella Coola and Prince Rupert run. What's the latest on that?
Well, it's still the ridiculous system where you have the big ferry getting into Bella Bella, and you've got to change to the Nimkish to go from Bella Bella to Bella Coola. So it is this small 16-vehicle vessel just doing the milk run. Takes a very long while. Really not adequate for, people say for tourists, and that's the flagship thing. It's going to open up the coast for tourists, but it's also, you've got to remember that residents are using it. The other thing is that they are still, although they're paying full summer fares, have only just had about 3 or 4 weeks where they were paying full summer fares but still getting the winter service. So the route from Hardy up to Prince Rupert was just once a week. So it was really, really impacting those First Nations communities on the coast.
Of all of the ferry routes, which do you think is the worst in terms of service problems? And I don't mean just late departures, but in terms of inadequate, killing commerce.
It's very hard to say because every one is impacting. I mean, you say we look at the one in Quadra and Campbell River, that has an impact in those communities. The what's happened in the Central Coast has a huge impact. All the problems from Rupert to Haida Gwaii having impact there. And then the very cost of the big ferries. The number of people I've heard from saying, I'm not going to, why come to the island, or can I leave the island if I've got a trailer? I just can't afford to go on holiday.
You just reminded me of the parking issue. Like, very often the parking lots at the major terminals are full now. And I raised it to you. There was a piece of property beside the Nanaimo terminal that was for sale, and you said you were going to raise it in estimates with the minister.
I wasn't able to get to that, but the issue of parking is, again, I would say almost extortionate. The parking lots are full because everybody's walking onto the ferries because they can't afford to take their cars. But if you're dropping somebody off or picking somebody up, you're still got to pay. You've got to pay $1. It's like, how much can you get out of people? How much can BC Ferries get out of people?
I just got the 5-minute sign, so I got about 10 questions left, but my favorite question, is there something you want to raise that I haven't asked yet?
Well, BC Ferries, I think, is important for all of us because we are an economy that is evolving, and we do need our ferry system. So to try and make that really affordable, and usable again. I mean, you look at
Yeah.
these very busy runs. We have a lot of busy runs, and yet they say, well, we've got to put the fares up. Well, bring the fares down, you get even busier runs, you'll make even more money.
Yeah.
Very, very simple equation.
Is it a
there.
staffing thing? If you get more runs, they've got to hire more people?
I don't know how the staffing works, but that is not going to increase the cost. I mean, you're looking at bridges, you look at tunnels, and you look at buses. We've got this hybrid transportation infrastructure, partly transit and partly infrastructure. You just need to put the money into it to make it work.
You said the magic word transit. What do you think of the transit plebiscite in Vancouver? We don't know, as we're recording this, we don't know the results yet.
We still don't know the results. Obviously, people are hoping it's going to be a positive result, but I think there's a foreboding that it won't be, that it will be a no, and then there is a huge mess in the Lower Mainland because we have several million people living there who need good transportation. You try and drive through there, it's really busy. You need to have a good transit system. That needs funding, and the government has walked away from the Lower Mainland funding. I
didn't get a vote, but I would have been a no because of the way the system is mismanaged already, and then give them more money to make it worse. I think it needs to be cleaned out. Liquor changes. Do you get many calls about that?
Get some calls about it, not as many as I expected, but I think that it's one that's still seeping through. I think the biggest one was when people just regularly going to buy something in the liquor store and seeing that the prices had dropped, and then realizes they had to pay tax on top of that. There is a big concern about how this was handled, and again, who has benefited from this? We don't think that people of BC have benefited from it. We've had lots of announcements dribbling out. Then we got the full legislation, but it's not working for the people of BC, for the restaurateurs of BC, or for the bar owners of BC. Again, it's one wonders, who the government is trying to assist with this.
The people that donate to them. We know that.
I think that is really in the bottom line. I think that all these questions comes down to that. Who's paying?
I got to squeeze this one in too. North Island Hospital's project still doesn't have a childcare facility in it, they said there was no room.
That is very surprising because where the nurses, where the people are going to have, looking after children, it's been a great opportunity to.
Well, if we keep the old hospital, even though it's earthquake prone, we could do a lot of good things in there. Seniors too. A lot of people have been saying that we should keep the old hospital. The project is saying it categorically has to tear down. There is still a strong lobby to try and keep the old hospital. 2 minutes. North Island issues look ahead. Are there things like on your calendar?
There are a number of things. I'm very concerned about what's happening in Port Alice with the shutdown of the mill there at the moment. It's not going to be reopening until next year.
It is going to reopen though, eh?
Well, they're saying at the moment they're hoping to, but there's the question of fibre supply both for that mill and for other small mills. So I've been talking to the Minister of Forests or Forest Land and Natural Resource about how we can get fibre supply to the people who need it, how we can look at our tree farm licenses so they are responsive to our local communities, not just to the majors, the major licensees. So those mills can get it. So I've been having conversations with him, and I hope to get back into that when we sit for that 1 week.
Actually, you get a question period.
We get another question period. And then, of course, there's the issue of homelessness in Campbell River and the needs for housing.
They were at council this week. Tough issue. This
is a very big issue that the community's been grappling with for some time, and I don't think the government has really done enough. We've got supportive housing at Nicola Road and Rose Harbour, but we haven't had good BC housing, new BC housing stock for a long while.
30 seconds, I think. Maybe we're stretching it. Sorry, Gord. Redistribution of the constituency. Like you've got one of the largest areas and also one of the largest populations. But, I think there's a logical boundary at the Oyster River.
And that's what the Commission has said. They've kept it at the Oyster River. I presented to the Commission to basically thank them for that. And one of the Commissioners acknowledged the fact that this was a very large, diverse riding and very difficult to get around. And so wanted to keep it as intact as possible.
And how many times have you been elected now?
I'm in my third term, so 3 times.
Yeah, so she must be doing something right. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, John.
And thank you for watching. Thank you, volunteers. Thank you for Shaw for putting on Talk About. If you want to watch it again, Shaw TV North Island, Google it. We have a YouTube page.